Hi there. It's been an interesting week here. I lived in Chicago for 18 years before moving to Arizona, and I plan to move back to Chicago very soon. I've had the pleasure this last week of catching up on the SB10 bill that was introduced by Representative Greg Harris, an openly gay man out of the Chicago area, to the Illinois House. The bill has passed the Senate there. Governor Quinn has said he'll sign it, but it was a no vote. They didn't vote on it on the last day of the session at the end of the day because Greg Harris didn't feel like he had the votes to get it passed. I've seen some things that have been said in the Sun-Times. I'm not wanting to make this a Black Caucus issue, so I'm not addressing everybody there in the Black Caucus. Representative Duncan and Representative Mitchell signed on as co-sponsors of the bill, and they've helped with their votes, and there's some yes votes in the Democratic Black Caucus in Illinois, and that's great. What I'm talking to and who I'd like to address are the Black Caucus members, because we need your votes that are on the fence or have said that they'll vote no on the issue when it comes up. In particular, I'd like to talk about Representative Mayfield. She said she's gone to her people and in her district, and they say there's no reason not to vote for her. They can't give her a good reason. She voted present on the civil union law when it came up, and she has stated recently she intends to vote present on this one, which in my book is a no vote because it doesn't go to the majority. It just says you're here. It's like not doing nothing. It's kind of the chicken way out. I'd urge you to vote yes on it. I'd also like to address Representative Gordon Booth that made the comment that I'm a Christian before I'm a black woman, before I'm a Democrat. Well, you know, when you go into the House, that's fine. If you're a Christian, if you're a black woman, if you're a Democrat, that's what got you elected in there. But there's a separation of church and state for a reason, and you should leave the church out of this. I know that you may have feelings in your heart and the way you were taught and raised in the church, that's fine. But when you're voting on a bill like this, it shouldn't have the church coming into play. There's others that have said they've gotten pressures, like Thaddeus Jones, Representative Jones, who had two openly gay nephews that had died of HIV, and he is still on the fence about this issue and said he's getting pressure from the congregations in his district and that, you know, that this is a Black Caucus issue because of that, while Representative Duncan has said it's not a Black Caucus issue, as several others have said, but then Representative Jones says it is. And he himself was quoted in the Sun-Times as saying that just because this is the appetite of the month, do we want to pick up that menu and eat off of it because it's the right thing to do? Well, you know, Representative Jones, your statement right there answers your own question. It is the right thing to do. So pick the menu up, order from it, and eat from it, since it's the right thing to do in your own words. There are some other people that have said they'll vote against it. Representative Monique Davis, Representative Mary Flowers, Representative Eddie Jackson, and Representative Charles Jefferson. And I can't help but think that those members of the Black Illinois Caucus, Democrats, are voting that way because of the church. One of those people I'll address in particular is Monique Davis. Representative Davis has said that, you know, she wants to be an engineer, but she's not equipped to be an engineer. We can't just pass a law to make me an engineer. And then she went on to say that gay people aren't equipped to be in a marriage, I think referring to sexual parts and how things don't fit together. She also went on to say, as a justification for her no vote on this issue, that were they ever slaves for 500 years? Have they ever been hung from trees? I'd like to remind Representative Davis that while there was slavery, and that was a horrible American Holocaust in its own right, there were gay slaves that were treated the same way. Since slavery has ended, one of the first civil rights that they got after slavery ended was the right to be married. I'd like to remind the Christians also that are black Christians, and using that as a reason to vote no on this, that Christianity was something that I read about this week, and I read from several black scholars, and you can Google the information for yourself. It's out there. You can see what they have to say in the major universities that teach African American studies, that was something that was forced onto the black people to obliterate and acculturate them into almost being placated. So when they couldn't import any more slaves in, they used Christianity and things like an Anglo-Saxon custom of hopping the broom and reading Bible passages to make the people feel they were married. Even though they weren't legally recognized under the law or by the church, they would marry the slaves on the slave plantations, or the slaves would marry themselves and form this bond. Even though the slave owners would break them up when they saw fit for economic purposes or whatever, but really they discovered the value of Christianity in this whole thing and making them feel a bond together, because they were less likely to run away if they felt that they had a wife and if they had families. And they were also goaded into, for lack of a better word, breeding for economic profit. They would promise some of the women that, oh, if you have 15 children, I'll give you your freedom. Well, that benefited the slave owners greatly. And, you know, Christianity was a tool. That wasn't an African custom. In fact, they thought some of the African customs where a king of a tribe or a king or someone would take on many wives, as for lack of a better term, but have many concubines or wives, that was a sexual deviation to them. They used Christianity to wipe that out. So it hurts me, it hurts my friends, for anybody of color that's now a Christian to use the Christian church as a reason to hurt me. It was something that was used to hurt you. Whether you realize it or not, go look it up. I did, and I got quite educated on it this week. I'm no means an expert on it, but it's not hard to find the information. So I really wished you would stop using Christianity. I wished when you stepped into that house that you would step into it as citizens, not Christians, but citizens. Because I think before you're a Christian, you're a citizen of the United States. And that's what matters in this. The separation of church and state is a very important thing. We can't have our laws based on religion. I would also like to explain a little bit about myself and why this is an important issue to me. If I moved back to Illinois, I would love to have the right to be legally married. But as a child down south, I was raised by my grandparents. I went to church. I was a member of the church. I currently am agnostic, but I grew up in the church. And one of the reasons why I'm agnostic and I've stepped away from the church and the Christian belief system is that when my mother was living up north, she decided to marry a black man. She came to visit me in Tennessee, and as soon as the church found out about it, the people in the church quit talking to me. They shunned me. Her only crime was that she married a black man and she was a white woman. And to them, that was enough to quit talking to every member of the family. That was at the point around the time I left the church. Also, when everybody found out about it in the neighborhood, I was called nigger lover, nigger lips, nigger. So I felt the brunt and the sting of that word when it was used against me. I would never use that word against people of color. I fought for every civil right you guys have, and that's another thing that's bothered me this week that I've heard. They keep saying, well, to get it past our congregations and make our districts more accepting to it, we're going to call it an equal right, not a civil right. It's an equal right, yes, but it's still a civil right. I don't care what terminology you use, it's still a civil right. When the freed slaves were able to make their marriages legal in the Christian church, and if not in church, just make them legal with the court system, it was called a civil right. This right for us is not any different than that right for you back then. Only we've just been fighting for it now for a few decades, and we've finally gotten to the point where we can walk around and, you know, it's a little bit safer these days. But back to addressing Mrs. Davis, and Miss Davis, I mean, Representative Davis, about were they ever beaten, were they ever hung up for trees? Well, not only during slave times, gay people were. You know, they were right there with the men that were castrated during those times and beaten and forced to do things they didn't want to do for the slave owners, just like the women were. So that's just not a valid argument in my book. So I wished you would drop that one. I would also like to remind everybody that while there are still hate crimes involving race in this country, there's plenty of hate crimes that have happened the last few decades that have made national news. Matthew Shepard, for one, beaten and left hung up on a fence post to die, which he did. Recently, in the last month, a man in New York called hateful names like faggot and shot in the face and died. But a little bit more about myself. Why this is an issue to me, and I take offense, and it hurts me when Representative David says this stuff, is when I was in the military. I'd known from the time I was a child that I was gay. I never acted on it. I had never had sex with anyone when I was in the military. I was still a virgin. There was a video, Culture Club was on TV at the time. And I chose to stick up in an argument for Boy George. he was a gay man. And everybody knew it, whether he had said it or not, but everybody knew it. And by sticking up for him, I had another member of the Air Force where I was enlisted who had been raised in the church, and he thought it was all right to kick me in the face that night for merely sticking up for another person. It put my teeth through my jawline right here. It took about 8 stitches to close it up, and I still got the little scar there. I also, when I lived in Chicago, right after I met my first long-term partner that I had been with for 18 years, right when I first met him, we left a bar one night, and he was jumped by 2 gangbangers and beaten with a car antenna. I got him off of him, and they beat me, and I almost lost this eye over it. I've been called faggot, I've been called maricone, I've been called fudge packer, any hateful name you can think of. I've also in my lifetime been called nigger, as I said before, and while I know I haven't walked a mile in your shoes, I walked at least a foot or 2 in your shoes, and I know how those words hurt. It hurts me to see the church used as a tool of hate. The church that I was brought up in, and I don't hate them for what they did, they were racist. And the church I was brought up in, though, taught me, and the good lessons I still keep this day from the church, that you love everyone. You don't hate them, or you don't try and apply your morals and values on them. You may not like what they do. We don't want to force anybody in the church to do anything they don't want to do. However you worship in private, that's great. It's in private. That shouldn't be in the State House. And I guess I'd like to say in closing, that I'm just don't want that tool used against me any more than the slaves wanted it used against them. And I really wish you would stop it. If that's the only reason you had to vote no on this bill, you don't have a reason to vote no. Now, if you don't like gay people, that's one thing. Just come out and say it. Or, as Representative Mayfield voted present on the Civil Unions Bill, and she said she'll vote present on this, I'd rather have her just vote no on it, if that's the case, and let me know where she stands. Don't take the chicken way out on this and just say here, basically. I mean, show some strength and background, especially when you say you've asked your district and they can't give you any good reasons not to do it. Well, that should tell you something right there. You yourself said they can't give you any good reasons not to do it. So, all I'm asking for is equality, civil rights, the same as you have, so that if I choose to love someone, I can't help who I am. You can't help who you are. You can't change the color of your skin. I can't change who I am inside and who I love. I just would like to have the civil right to be able to love the person I love, make it legal under the eyes of the law, erase any complications with the insurance companies, erase any complications with the court systems or with hospitals, make it legal under the law so that, for tax purposes and everything else, we're looked the same as anyone else that's in a loving, committed, long-term relationship. So please vote yes on House Bill SB10 if it comes up in summer session or in the fall session. And please do it, if not for me, for some of my friends, for the people in your district. You have people of all colors in your district. You have to represent them, not just the churches in your district. They're gay people in your district. And if you say it's an equality thing, well, we're all equal. If you take off our skin and line us all up, and you don't ask any questions, we're all the same standing there. So, please give it a yes vote when it comes back up. Please, settle this once and for all and do the right thing, to quote Representative Jones. Pick up the menu and eat off of it. And do the right thing because it is the right thing. You have a good day now. Bye-bye.